One thing I like about doing these videos is the intelligence and wit of some of the comments under the line. I don't get that many views, but I do like the smartness and native wit about some of the people who comment, and so I'd like to do this video as a kind of a postscript to the last one I did about the Telford rape gangs report, in particular looking at the going into more detail about the numbers and also the conclusions as to what we can do about it. Now, a couple of the comments that I'm referring to here, I'll just show you from the last video. There are loads of them. They're pretty funny. Some of them are kind of funny about me as well. But there's one here from this fellow Patriot Mike, don't know who he is. But we therefore see a huge fuss and much publicity around the fact that an inquiry is being set up, conducted, etc., while the exercise itself goes nowhere near the central issue and the major reason for this phenomenon. Yeah, spot on. Or this fella Ben Gunn, with regard to your statement at the end of your video, it should be obvious to anyone who cares that Brits will never vote their way out of this mess as easily as they voted their way in. Collapse, although hard for anyone caught up in it, is the only way to motivate the population to take back control from their leaders. So this kind of comment, it leads me to think I'm not being too nerdy by going a bit more intelligent, a bit more into more detail, and that's what I'd like to do here. And what I want to look at is the numbers and what the numbers of victims and the numbers or the likely number of offenders means, and also why the two main responses, which are on the one hand from the authorities to set up one report after another, which never focuses on the perpetrator, is always focusing on the people who are not doing it, the council, the police, various other child protection authorities who may be not carrying out their responsibility, but that they are not carrying out the rapes. And on our side, our approach tends to be one of outrage, which is very easily manipulable and manipulable by politicians and by grifters, and which accomplishes very little. But what I want to do is to start with the numbers. Now let me do a quick recap. This is the BBC's report. Telford child sex abuse went on for generations, inquiry finds. The headline there, obvious evidence of child sex crimes in Telford was ignored for generations, leading to more than 1,000 girls being abused, an inquiry has found. Agencies blamed children for the abuse they suffered, not the perpetrators, and exploitation was not investigated because of nervousness about rape. So two things there that stand out from this report. These are the carry-home messages that the press are taking. 1,000 girls abused over a 40-year period, presumably up to the present day, and the nervousness about race prevented the authorities from looking at it properly. And that's repeated in The Guardian, this report in The Guardian. Look at those lovely pictures. I don't want to say what I think about those men. My feet won't touch the ground if I do. So more than 1,000 children in Telford were sexually exploited over decades, 4 decades is what the report says, amid the failure of authorities to investigate. Emboldened offenders, no, these weren't rapists, these were Muslim rapists. They weren't emboldened, they were Muslim. An independent inquiry into the scandal has concluded. Issues were not investigated because of nervousness about nervousness about race. And they don't seem to have been all that nervous about rape, actually. And the fact they weren't investigated, well, they'd already happened. They have to have happened. They weren't prevented, and they weren't prevented because the perpetrators weren't focused on from day one. Anyway, so let me go into the numbers. Now that figure of 1,000, that comes from this Mirror report. There, if I go up there, that's this is a 2018 report by the Mirror. Really good journalism, it appears to have been, and it was very highly praised by that Telford report. Britain's worst ever child grooming scandal exposed hundreds of young girls beaten, sold for sex, and some even killed. So, raped, beaten, sold for sex, and some even killed. Up to 1,000 children could have suffered in Britain's worst known abuse scandal, where sex gangs targeted girls as young as 11. That was common to find that age of 11. And as many as 1,000 children could have suffered at the merciless hands of perverts and torturers. That's no exaggeration, in Telford since the 1980s. Okay. Now I just want to play you this clip from the fella. This is Tom Crow, the QC, who did the report in Telford. And what he says about the mirrors, that number of 1,000, he basically goes through the many sources, the massive evidence that he looked at, and what he concluded about the mirrors figure of 1,000 girls abused over decades, 4 decades.
And I've come to the conclusion that the Sunday Mirror's estimate is an entirely measured, reasonable and non-sensational assessment.
Okay, measured, reasonable and non-sensational. He also went on to say that that report that he did wouldn't have happened without the newspaper reporting that the Sunday Mirror did. He gave high praise for it. I think rightly so, particularly, and the woman journalist who did it as well. I'll come to her in a little while. But she deserves high praise. Now, the numbers. That's 1,000 girls abused over a period of roughly 4 decades. I think slightly less than 4 decades. It says since the 1980s. And I can't imagine that this report looked at evidence that came from, or events that occurred past 2020. So I suspect a little less than 4 decades. But that's 1,000 girls. Now, what is the number of people in Telford? I should say that this report, it didn't look at the borough of Telford and Wrekin. It just looked at the brief was to look at these rape gangs or the child sexual exploitation, there's a euphemism, within Telford. Now, if let me go here to, the normal way I would do it is I'd go to Wikipedia and I'd look at demography. So that's Telford, the Wikipedia page, and then I'd go down to demography, and the demography would give you a figure for Muslims or for Asian. Bear with me. Yeah, so in 2011 the town was 4.7% Asian. Normally Asian means 2/3 of that figure, 2/3 to 3/4, 65 to 70% of that figure will be Muslim. That doesn't apply here so much because Telford for some reason has a big Sikh population, so it's difficult to work out the number of Muslims from the number of Asians. So what I've done, hold on, what I did was to take to go to the census figures and to take the number of Muslims in the entire borough at the midpoint of that 40-year period. So the midpoint would have been 20 years ago. That takes us neatly to the census of 2001. And if I go here to that census, this is, what page are we on? That's page 3. Okay. If I go up there, that's the borough-wide profile published by Telford and Wrekin Council based on the census. Now, if I go down here, what it said there is in 2001, the number of Muslims was 2,030. If you see that number there, Muslim is 2,030 people. Okay. Now, I should say that's across the whole of the borough, not just in Telford. The number of girls who were gang raped were just in the town of Telford. The town of Telford has a population of 142,000. The borough of Telford and Wrekin is about 10 or 15% higher than that. But a bit over 15% higher at about 173,000. But to keep things conservative, to make things nicer, to make the figures look nicer on Muslims, to be less censorious of Muslims, I'm going to take the figure from, or the number of Muslims as being from the whole of the borough. That's 2,030. So what I then do is to take that figure of 2,030 and calculate what percentage of that number is rape-aged males. So how many rape-aged Muslims were there in across the borough? That would have been about 15% of 2030, because let's assume females aren't doing it, so that's half the population out. According to a suppressed Birmingham police report, I think from about 2011, 2013, the definition of they didn't use this term, but the age of males doing this, they said was about between 17 and 40. I would put it at a bit slightly wider age range, but again, to be a kind of bit more generous to Muslims, somewhere between about 18 and 42, maybe 43, about 18 to 42, and that is about 15%. That's about 30% of the male population, which is 15% of the overall Muslim population. So then 2030, 15% of 2030, that works out to be 304. So the average number of, throughout that period from the 80s to the early 2020s, the average number of rape-age Muslim males in the borough would have been about 304 if my calculation of taking the number at the midpoint was is a good mean. And then what I've also done is to say, okay, that was over a 40-year period. A 40-year period, that's about between 2 and 2.5 generations. So again, to be generous towards Muslims, if we multiply 304 by 2.5 to say that the population is rolling over and renewing with each generation, so you're getting some Muslims falling out of the rape age range and others coming into it, so that population renews itself. Again, this is a very rough calculation, but this is all we have. Nobody is providing the data. Nobody is focusing on the perpetrators. So this is as good as anyone else is going to do. So 2.5 times 304, that works out, I think, to be about 761, I think. So I would round that down to about 750 just to keep the maths easy, but you can still use the figure of 761. So what you have over that 40-year period, you have 1,000 girls getting very, very viciously gang raped and tortured amongst a population of about 750 or 761 males. Now, that in itself suggests that the very large majority of rape-age Muslim males are involved in this really hideous criminality. Now, one objection there that you might say is, but maybe Telford's an epicenter and Muslims are coming in from other towns to do it in Telford because it's not going on in their town. Yeah, which town is this not going on in? Are they coming in from Rotherham because it's not going in there? Are they coming in from Oldham, Rochdale, Oxford? Which towns? Birmingham or Keighley, or Manchester? Which towns are they coming in from because it's not going on at home in their own towns? Not many, I'll bet. The next objection you might make is, but there's a tiny minority, a small minority of unrepresentative extremists in Telford who are doing it to hundreds and hundreds of girls, just half a dozen men doing it to hundreds and hundreds, to 1,000 girls. Well, my response to that is, who normally has more sexual partners? Is it the prostitute? These girls were sold out as prostitutes and gang raped as prostitutes. Is it the prostitute, or is it the customer of the prostitutes? I bet you would say, in general, a prostitute has many more sexual. These girls weren't prostitutes; they were vicious gang rape victims. But for the purposes of the data, just imagine that they're being prostitutes. That's what they were being used as by these Muslim gangs. And a prostitute has many more clients than any individual client will have. So that suggests there are more than 1,000 men doing this, many more. I want to give you an illustration of this from some of the stories. They're pretty shocking, some of these stories, even the BBC story. That's Telford case, Telford abuse concerns over youth workers caseloads. Again, focusing on the authorities, not on the perpetrators. But I want to show you, I want to go down here. One victim told how she was abused at a rape house, and the town's Conservative MP, Lucy Allen, has said, while working class girls were being traded for sex in a routine way. The man who ran that rape house, he only got 2.5 years in jail, by the way. Holly, a victim of exploitation in the town from the age of 14, told the Victoria Derbyshire programme she went to a sexual health clinic for the morning after pill twice a week for 3 years, but no one ever asked her any questions. So she was being traded in a routine way, and she later said she was being beaten with a belt and sold 2 or 3 times a night. So she's having many more sexual partners forced on her, more than one sexual partner being forced on her. If it was just one, I doubt it would have been prosecuted for this crime. Now, let me go to the next story. And that is that Daily Mirror story, the one that from 2018 that came up with the figure, Sunday Mirror story, that came up with the figure of 1,000 girls. One 14-year-old groomed and abused after her phone number was sold to paedophiles said, "I hated what was happening and my abusers made my skin crawl, but I was told that if I said a word to anyone, they'd come for my little sister and tell my mum I was a prostitute. Night after night I was forced to have sex with multiple men in disgusting takeaways and filthy houses. I must have been getting the morning after pill from a local clinic at least twice a week, but no one asked any questions. I fell pregnant twice and had 2 abortions. Hours after my second termination, I was taken by one of the abusers to be raped by more men. The worst moment came just after my 16th birthday when I was drugged and gang raped by 5 men." So she is having a very large number of sexual partners forced on her. So again, this is evidence that there are many more perpetrators of this crime than there are victims, as you would expect in a sexual slavery, enforced prostitution situation. And the next point is that these girls appear to have been used for years and years. There doesn't appear to have been a rapid turnover. A lot of girls were abused and raped like this, but they appear to have been used for a long period of time, so not a rapid turnover. Used for, generally I would say, for a period of about 4 or 5 years at least, at the minimum, for the ones that are appearing in the press. Let me go again to that Mirror story here. Here's one. In 2002, 13-year-old Becky Watson died in a car accident that was reported at the time as a prank. Okay, now what she says is, the Mirror investigation found she suffered 2 years of abuse by an Asian grooming gang, which began when she was just 11. Tragic diaries obtained by the Mirror reveal her torment at being made to sleep around. Her mum, Torrin Watson, said she repeatedly told police that Becky was being abused and even gave them a list of suspects, etc. Vicky Round, a friend of Becky's, was abused by the same gang who got her hooked on crack cocaine aged 12 and on heroin by 14. She died aged 20 of a drugs overdose. So what you have is these girls being abused from about the age of between 11 and 13, and then that carrying on for about at least 4 or 5 years in most cases. That seems to be what happens. So my point is, it's not one girl who's abused for one night or a few nights in 1 week and then discarded, abused regularly for many years, which again suggests that if you have 1,000 girls getting abused in this way, there are many more perpetrators doing it. That's the suggestion here. I think it's impossible to say that a minority of the 761 roughly rape-age Muslim males in the borough throughout that period, it's impossible to say that it was only a minority of them doing it. And this is something that comes up time and time again whenever there's a police investigation, whenever there's one of these I think ineffectual reports coming out. Time and again, the numbers of girls abused really means that it must have been the very large majority of men, Muslim men of rape age in that area involved in this criminality, and that would accord with the doctrine of Islam, the history of Islamic practice, and the current practice under Islam. What the religion tells these people to do, to use sex as a matter of war being mandated for Muslims to use against non-Muslims until the whole world is Islamic. So it's impossible to conclude that it's anything other than a very large majority of these men. That's my point. Now, what that means, if you accept that, or even if you just partially accept that, what that means is that the only way we're going to get a grip, put a stop to this type of offending, is by focusing unremittingly and unflinchingly on the perpetrators. And really that means the Muslim population, because it seems to be endemic, it seems to pervade, I would say, pretty much the entire Muslim population, the entire male Muslim population, which is other people, females are not able to rape, so it is the entire male population who, when they're of the age to rape, they do it. And that is what these reports should be focusing on. That's what local authorities should be focusing on. That is what police should be focusing on. And that is the one thing they will not focus on. It is the one thing they would rather die than do. But it is the only way to put a stop to this criminality. I think the reason they won't do it is because looking down the road, they realise what I realise, which is really the only reason, if it is so deep-rooted, so pervasive amongst the Muslim population, the only effective solution to this terrible problem is the removal, the repatriation of the Muslim population from our lands. And the evidence certainly appears to be that this offending hasn't stopped yet. This fellow, Keith Osmond Smith, he was, while working as West Mercia police chaplain, he went on sabbatical after he told a national newspaper he doubted if information passed to West Mercia police officers about child sex exploitation was always acted upon. And that's the fellow there. And what he says, Keith Osmond Smith, this was in a report on the 12th of July, this BBC report, 12th of July of this year. Osmond Smith says abuse is still going on. I think he means this form of abuse is still going on. So it hasn't been got a grip on. I don't think it will until until the focus is directly and really unsentimentally on the perpetrators, i.e. the Muslim population. Now, the two things that are not going to work are the response of the authorities and our response, our current response. The response of the authorities is to have one more police investigation, one more inquiry. I think we will soon get inquiries into all the inquiries that have gone on. Those inquiries don't work. Our response is one of outrage. We start saying that this police officer should be sacked, this council worker should be denied their pension, that councillor should go to jail, etc. That is misdirection. That is focusing on these people, that is focusing on justice and not war. Before you impose justice, you have to win the war. And these rape gangs are part of a policy of war, using sex and rape as a weapon of war. If you don't win the war, you can't impose justice. And also, if you rely on outrage, that's really easily managed by the authorities. They know how to manage that just by setting up another inquiry and saying, you now have to be quiet whilst we inquire into this, and you have to be orderly and organised and let us get on with our job. And also it makes you very manipulable by people who will claim to be campaigning on this. I mean sort of right-wing grifters who go on YouTube, get you angry, make you outraged, and then get you to, because they know that's the best way to get you into a tiz, so that you will then bang the donate button and they will take the money and go away on holiday. And none of that works. So those two things, reports and outrage, they do not work. They're not going to work. What is necessary is to focus not on the councils who actually are not doing this one, not doing very much at all, it seems, but upon the perpetrators who are doing this, who are committing the rapes, and that pervades the Muslim population. Now, I want to explain what I mean by the reports not working. If I go to this is the I want to look at this is the executive summary of the Telford Report. So if I go up to the top there, that's the report of the independent inquiry, Telford child sexual exploitation. So there you are. If I I want to look at this. It focuses on its focus is relentlessly on the council or on the police, and it shies away from the perpetrators, which is where the focus needs to be. Now, I read this part out in the last video I did, but I think it's so telling. It's kind of, I'd say this is the key point, the most telling. This is where the screen flips up in this report. Now, as to the suggestion raised by witnesses that Telford's child sexual exploitation issues are specifically centred around the Pakistani or South Asian community, it would, in my judgment, be wholly wrong and undoubtedly racist to equate membership of a particular racial group with propensity to commit child sexual exploitation. Actually, he doesn't say why it would be wrong. He actually goes on to say why it would be wholly right. And he doesn't say why it would be racist. He just comes out with that blanket statement. And what's interesting here is the two carry-home messages. One was 1,000 girls. The other one was nervousness about race preventing people, the authorities, from investigating. We'll look at this next bit for nervousness about race. That said, on the papers disclosed by key stakeholders, it is an undeniable fact that a high proportion of those cases involved perpetrators that were described by victims, survivors and others as being Asian or often Pakistani. Notice he's careful. He doesn't use the word Muslim very often at all throughout this report. He shies away from that. The inquiry, and he goes on to say, I have been cautious not to infer, and I'll highlight this bit. I have been cautious not to infer too much from names which may indicate wider geographical background and indeed religious heritage, heritage. I have been cautious not to infer too much from names which may indicate wider geographical background and indeed religious heritage, but wholly unreliable indicators of national background and in particular religious belief. Can you make head or tail of that? What he's saying is geographical background, that's a wholly unreliable indicator of national background. I assume what he means is if you're Pakistani but you have that doesn't say whether or not you have a British passport. That's a distinction without a difference. That's hair splitting. And that is I think that there is nervousness about race. I think that hair splitting, that pedantry, that non-distinction is caused by his nervousness about race. And then to say that indeed religious heritage is a wholly unreliable indicator of religious belief. Well, some of those perpetrators might not go to mosque regularly, but they'll probably define themselves as being Muslim, or they'll say they're from the Muslim community, and certainly they'll be heavily influenced by the culture of the Muslim population, and that culture will itself be heavily influenced by the religion. So I think this is nervousness about race causing this report to focus not on the perpetrators but on the safe targets, which are the council and the police. And this is the thread, this is an iron rod running throughout every report that is conducted into this line of offending. Look at the failings of the authorities. This councillor, that policeman, and they always end up really not fingering anyone in particular, not getting anyone in particular, because 20, 30 years later the evidence has gone cold. Nothing was put in writing. You can't get anything on anyone. They may have acted okay within the boundaries of their job. The closest that any of them got to it, this is the J report, that's page 8. If I just show you the J report into the Rotherham case, independent inquiry into child sexual exploitation in Rotherham, that was, I think, 2014 she reported there. Let me just go down a bit. Bear with me. Now, she Baroness J, as she's now known, she was braver than most report writers in that she kind of suggested maybe there should be a little bit of reflected focus onto the Muslim community. By far the large majority of perpetrators were described as Asian by victims, yet throughout the entire period counsellors did not engage directly with the Pakistani heritage community to discuss how best they could jointly address the issue. So even she's not saying we need to focus on the Muslim population. She's criticising the council for not engaging with them, as to how to jointly address the issue. So all of these reports, they fail, they're going to continue to fail because they will not, they have a block against focusing on the perpetrators, the people actually doing this. On our own side, the temptation is just to succumb to outrage, exasperation. Outrage feels nice because it makes you feel better than someone, and to feel absolutely certain that you're better than someone, you're criticising and being hard on someone, makes you feel good. It's tempting. It doesn't work. It fails. It has failed so far. It will continue to fail. It will mean you can feel good about yourself when someone on the careerist right goes onto social media, shouts and rants and spits at the camera and gets you angry enough to bang the donate button. They get money out of you which doesn't serve any purpose at all. If that's what you want to do, get fleeced by careerists, then outrage is a good response. The reason it doesn't work is that the authorities are really good at managing that. They'll say, yes, there's a lot of public concern about this. We're now going to have a public inquiry. If you look at a mayor, Burnham, Andy Burnham, in the Oldham Council Committee, managing the outrage. He was extremely skilled at that. I think he's got a lot of professional skill at dealing with that. And what you will get is you'll get inquiries conducted and you'll be told, now let us deal with it. We've appointed someone very senior to look into this. He knows best. He will look at this line of offending properly, and then what you'll find is outrage leads to an inquiry, failures are identified, apologies are issued, lessons are learned, rinse and repeat. Okay, and the line of offending will continue. Now, I realise, and I'm going to show you a couple of stories in a second. I realise that there is a lot of room for outrage, but I say again, the outrage is about a matter of justice, bringing the people who failed to book. But first, you have to win the war, and you have to do that by focusing on the people who are making war against you. And this crime is a weapon of war being used against us by the Muslim population, according to Muslim doctrine. That is your first and initially pretty much your only focus. You have to do that. Now, but as regards the outrage, let me show you a couple of stories. First of all, what you have is this story in the Shropshire Star: Telford child sex abuse reporter hits back at fag packet research claim. Now, this lady, Geraldine McKelvey, remember she was the lady who the reporter who wrote the Sunday Mirror reports. Well, she was accused by this man. This is Andrew Mason, the chair of Telford and Regan Safeguarding Children Board. And Mr. Mason, he said, it's been claimed we are the worst in the country. We are not the worst in the country. There's a defence. These accusations that have been made are based on inappropriate use of statistics and, quite frankly, misleading statistics. No, they're not. The inquiry has proved they're not. You were wrong. Are you going to... Well, so again, there's plenty of room for outrage there if you want it. I've been trying to find the basis for that figure of 1,000. We are in a situation where Telford is being maligned as the capital of child sexual abuse on the basis of an estimate on the back of a fag packet, which I think is quite disgusting. So that's him. That's Andrew Mason. Incidentally, I googled to try for Andrew Mason, the chair of Telford and Regan Safeguarding Children Board. And although there is a Google result, when you click on it, nothing comes up. Maybe the link's gone dead. Maybe the page has been scrubbed. I don't know. But it's difficult to find much about him. I couldn't find much about him on Telford's website. Make of that what you will. Have a search around yourselves. See if you can find something. Put it in the comments. Now, the next one is this guy. Telford's sex crime claims sensationalised, says police chief. Telford's police chief, that's the chief cop for Telford, the town of Telford, has denied the town has a specific problem with child sexual exploitation. Superintendent Tom Harding accused the Sunday Mirror of sensationalist reporting after it said 1,000 children may have been abused by grooming gangs. He said he had no idea where the figure had come from. I don't believe Telford has a discernible problem compared to other towns, he told the Shropshire Star. Well, what does that mean? Child sexual exploitation will be taking place all over the country, and Telford is not different to anywhere else. I am confident we understand the scale of the problem here, and we have got the resources here to deal with it. Blah-de-blah. Okay. Now, there's, if you want to really, if you really want to get outraged, I mean, you can look at this story. Telford cop asked colleagues not to review child abuse case investigated by his dad. That's the Sunday Mirror report. It's pretty poor. And there's one quote stands out to me. On 9th of March 2018, Superintendent Harding, I think that's Tom Harding, the fellow I just talked about, emailed colleagues saying, although she, that's a girl, I think her sister and mum were killed when that fella there set fire to a house. Although she had a child with him under 16, they were together for years before he set the house alight. He was convicted of murder and there is nothing further to review, nothing to do with Operation Chalice. End quote. So that seems to back up my view that if these girls, these 1,000 girls, were having sex with just one man, so if it was one offender per girl, chances are it wouldn't have been prosecuted, it wouldn't have been seen as gang rape. It might just have been seen as a little bit of an underage relationship, which is what I think he is implying by this quote. So, although I could be misreading that quote in that report. So, and this gentleman. What's happened to him? What's happened to this Tom Harding fellow? Well, senior officer. This is a report from 2020. Senior officer moving from West Mercia Police to neighbouring force, and he's going to Gwent, and there he got a very high praise from the local policing assistant chief constable Rachel Jones, who praised Chief Superintendent Harding's impact on the force. She said, on behalf of West Mercia Police, I'd like to thank Tom for his leadership, drive and commitment to local policing. During his time with the force, he has developed some fantastic community initiatives, including We Don't Buy Crime, and I'm pleased he will be sharing this best practice with other forces. I don't think there's any irony there. So I read that because the pattern that I've observed from other cases say including Oldham and Oxford, is that people who police officers or council officers or councillors who get fingered as being somehow associated with failings in respect to these rape gangs seem to go on to enjoy really, I would say, quite spectacularly lucrative and successful careers. What I suspect is probably happening is the bureaucratic class around them, they the sort of entitlement class, you could say, they close ranks behind these people, and the story that gets put about is, poor you have been hounded out of your job by a bunch of right-wing dogs in the media. It's not fair. We will waft you higher. We will give you good references and make sure you get a good job somewhere else. And they do. And I would expect that this gentleman there, Tom Harding, and also this gentleman here, what's his name? I think it's Andrew Mason. Whatever they may have done wrong, and I don't know enough I don't know enough to expose myself to a libel allegation by accusing them of this, that, and the other. But I think that just the mere fact that they've been associated in the press and given a hard time in the press, associated with these rape gangs, or with the failure to enforce against them properly. The fact that they've been identified in the press, I think that means that they will probably get promoted and enjoy a lucrative career. Andrew Mason, he's looking like he's getting on a bit. He might get a nice payout, that's what I would guess. And I would guess that this fella, Tom Harding, I think he will enjoy a really, really very successful, very highly promoted career within the police. That just seems to be the pattern with this offending. So my point here is there is a lot of room for outrage, but we're just going to have to resist that, because it doesn't accomplish anything except for us giving away our money in donations to people who are not going to do anything worthwhile with it. They're just going to get you excited, build a career on social media, take the money and go on holiday. And also it will encourage the authorities to go through the same old routine, this familiar routine, another day, another report, apologies, failings noted, procedural improvements put in place, learning the lessons, and rinse and repeat, as I say. So that is what the outrage will do. And this is why I'm not a lot harder on the authorities than I am, because I don't think it accomplishes very much. I don't think it is council officers and councillors in general committing these rapes. I don't think in general it's policemen committing these rapes. I don't think these rapists rape because the child protection authorities may be negligent, if they are. I don't think the negligence of police officers mean that Muslims rape. If that were the case, then you would expect other groups to be committing rape, and certainly other ethnic minority groups, black people, West Indian people, Sikhs and Hindus. But the evidence suggests that Sikhs and Hindus are not doing this, committing these crimes, this particular line of offending. So the Muslim people don't commit these offences because they are taxi drivers or because the taxi licensing authorities are too lax. Muslims don't commit offences like this because the takeaway licensing authorities are too lax. Muslims are doing this because it is within their culture, which is fed by the religion, and the religion commands war, using rape and sexual slavery as a weapon of war. And that has happened for thousands of years. It is embedded into the culture. It is a part of ethnicity, and the Muslim population, they need to be focused on, because they are the section of society from which these offences are coming, and it seems to pervade Muslim society. And now, if you focus on the Muslim population, I think the inevitable conclusion is that repatriation of the Muslim population of our country is the only way to put a stop to this extraordinary, this massive wave of incredibly vicious offending. I don't see what else is going to work. I think nothing else is going to work. And that, therefore, and I've explained how I think that is likely to be accomplished. But that is the one thing that nobody is doing. No one is thinking through how that can be accomplished. If you want to know what you can do, what can you do, that is all you need to do, is to sit in your armchair and think through how that repatriation can be accomplished in reasonably peaceful ways that avoid civil war and atrocity. Civil war and atrocity might feel attractive if you're angry. You quickly get sick of them, and they don't work either. I don't know of anyone anyway who's realistically grappling with this issue. One or two people have tried to just get a touch on it, not very effectively. My view is that when the economy, society breaks down, we will have to seek law through a different mechanism, but by voting with our feet, a bit like joining a club. And then when I think that happens, people who vote with their feet will make very hard-headed, clear-eyed choices and will not join a legal system that allows a lot of invader populations to be members, precisely because of the high levels of crime. No one wants to pay more money in order to be a victim of crime. And you will find those invader populations finding themselves excluded and living in unsurvivable circumstances, and I think they will then go voluntarily. That is, and I have acted on that method by producing a legal code that people can use. We, other people, need to think through a method to accomplish that repatriation without atrocity, and I don't think people are doing that. But the more we put that off, the more violent and ineffectual, the more useless our methods will be until we eventually do it. And that is the task for this generation, to work that out.